Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce and another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond compare.
Jetzt kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Inzo an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!
Welcome back to Dortmund Dispatch. Today I'm joined by Ali. My local team has won a big playoff game today, so my voice is a little gone as I was in attendance. But big soccer fan of Borussia Dortmund and my local team. So very happy, very excited to be here. Ali, how are you doing this weekend?
I'm good. We got some sun after a couple gloomy days, so pretty happy about that. Just wanting the international break to end. It always goes on for too long.
Yeah, I said it before on our show, but it needs to just be a couple month period where it's just international football and you separate it from the season. There's too much travel. It's too stop-start. It just does not make sense. But first of all, we're going to do some housekeeping, and that's going to be a very, very long injury update. So let's start with Karim Adeyemi. He's returned to running and is expected to return to full training in the near future. There were pictures of him today training with the ball. And for those of you who don't know, you'll often just do regular running before you start kicking a ball, doing more complex movements like that. We have Gio Reyna. He is expected to be a part of first team training this week. We'll see if that happens. But then we have Julian Duranville. He has returned to light running and is being closely monitored. So still doing that individual training, not necessarily touching a ball yet. So still probably a couple weeks away at the earliest. Then you'll have Valdemar Anton set to return to first team training after his hip issues. Nicolas Sula should be out for a couple more weeks. Kale Watkins' problems were supposedly fairly minor, but there's little news regarding him, so he could be back this week. He could not be. We just don't know yet. Ali, who do you think has been the most important player that's been missing for Borussia Dortmund?
I think it's a pretty easy answer. Adeyemi, he's heavily involved in the pressing and the counter pressing, and his ability on the ball is not it's very much missed. So yeah, definitely Adeyemi.
Yeah, so for me, I actually completely disagree. Despite my love for Karim Adeyemi and having promised him to be one of our best players this season, you may think that I would say Karim Adeyemi, but I just think that you have to look at what you've been able to replace. And replacing Karim Adeyemi with Jamie Bino Gittins or Maxi Bayer is a bit better than replacing Valdemar Anton or Nicolas Sula with a certain Emre Can, who we won't be seeing in either of the next two matches thanks to his red card. But to me, the biggest difference is Anton. You really want to be seeing him just creating that partnership with Nicholas Schlotterbeck. And it just hasn't happened. I did say that I was a little concerned with, is he going to be, the long-term solution? He hasn't necessarily shown that yet, but he's still very clearly a better defender, better passer.
Of course.
Better, just more press resistant, better footballer in the back line than Emre Can has been this season. Because we've been fine in front of the yellow wall, and as soon as we go out, Emre Can has been a huge problem. And I think Anton's had issues betting into the side, and I think criticism's very fair, but there's a massive gap there at the center back position, and that's something we've really struggled with. So let's move on next, and we're going to be dissecting Dortmund's struggles. We're going to be talking, is it Sahin? Is it the squad? Is it a bit of luck? So Ali, what do you think is the biggest issue right now?
Man, The biggest issue is that I think a lot of us expected Shaheen to, you know, already, be able to put his style into the team and to make the right calls at the right time. And a number of games this season, whether it's substitutions or starting certain players, overusing certain players, there's been inexperience on display, but it's not entirely his fault. I think it's a mix of both Shaheen and the squad, um, because it's team sport. Everybody's involved. Um, but yeah, I think Shaheen's inexperience and I guess putting the team in a situation where they're sometimes unsure um, of how to react, of what to move forward with in certain games, and overall just overplaying is definitely a big issue for us.
Yeah, so I've talked about this a bit before, but in the preseason and in some of the first games, you saw a very well-defined system where your left back is going to come a bit more narrow, and your right back is going to be the one to push up the pitch and to provide that attacking width. Your right-sided winger is going to come a bit in field, almost as like a second striker type of role, which would complement Julian Brandt as a creative hub, and just being able to roam it around above the box without necessarily uh, impeding him from getting forward. And then you have your left winger holding the touchline, staying very wide, and being that guy that is going to take on all the 1v1s and do a ton of dribbling when we're in the final third. And in transition, you'll have both your right winger and your left winger able to like run in behind and take the ball into feet. But mainly, it would be your right winger in behind, your left winger playing with the ball at his feet, and running at the back line, with the left back pinching in as a left center back, and your right back providing the width up the field. The double pivot functions the way a double pivot would. Julian Brandt gets that kind of free roll. Your striker does a bit of hold up, bit of kind of everything, like very complete forward, and that's why Sergio Guirassy has been there. And even before he wasn't fit, Maxi Bayer was not getting into that position. So to me, like we saw that, and like having that idea, having a concrete way of playing is very, very important. And since things started to go awry, we've kind of given up on that. And to me, that's the biggest issue here is that, or the biggest argument against Shaheen is that at this point, there is no consistency to what the team does. And part of it could be because he may have figured out half a system that works, but because of the demands of modern football and Champions League, um, for Champions League teams, you essentially don't get to train the day before you play a Champions League match or a day after. So you're essentially losing 3 days of training a week. You also have the match in between there, and you don't get to drill in these ideas. And so you're essentially just not playing. You're not able to learn a new system because when you were supposed to learn it during preseason, uh, we've kind of gotten rid of that. And to me, that's a big argument against Shaheen because now it's almost like we're just like having the players go out there and try and perform in a way that they don't necessarily know how to do. And that's very bad management. So that to me is what I'm seeing because it's just so wildly inconsistent week to week and even like moment to moment in the matches for when we go long and when we play short, and then when do we press and when do we not press. Like a good teams, they know when they're supposed to press, they know when they're supposed to drop off, and that to me is not something I've seen. It's not something anyone I've really spoken to has seen. Ali, do you disagree with me? Do you think I'm like close? Like what are your thoughts on the
No,
situation?
I think we're saying almost the same thing in that his inexperience is showing, right? As soon as the results weren't there, he switched up the plan. Um, we did talk about our iffiness with the back three, considering we don't have that many center backs, and he's completely abandoned the idea, as you said. So I don't disagree, but I do think it obviously comes back to his inexperience. He's still a young manager, so there's like a line that we have to, yeah, or I guess a question we have to answer. How tolerant are we gonna be until, like, are we gonna wait until he gets it right, or are we gonna be one of those clubs that just hires someone else? You know what I mean? In some sense, but yeah, it comes down to his inexperience. Um, I I think I've said it before where I like his ideas. I think they should do work, things like that, but he hasn't really been able, I think, as you said it earlier, to really make it stick. And that's, yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, just that, at different angles.
Yeah, in terms of him leaving and what the club does next, like we've seen what the club does, and the club loves to hold on to these guys, and they'll talk about how essentially they want to find the next Jurgen Klopp, and like the Jurgen Klopp is a once in a generation guy. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't. It's not a sound methodology for me, to find the next Jurgen Klopp by just sticking to one of these guys that has played for Borussia Dortmund forever. Because Jurgen Klopp, at the peak of his career, was a second tier striker, kind of, for Mainz, and that's where he came through, and that's where he coached before he came to Borussia Dortmund. And he'd already like kind of cut his teeth, you would say, um, in a very hard division, the second Bundesliga, a couple seasons in the Bundesliga, maybe only one and a half, something like that. But when you're shooting like for the stars and trying to find a guy and insisting that every guy is gonna be the next Jurgen Klopp, like sometimes you just get it wrong, or sometimes you like hire a guy too early. And there's also this instance where like Shaheen has the potential to be a world class coach because he is so young. He is just 36. But if you throw a guy, and he just gets a little bit out of his depth, then you could end up with a situation where like the confidence is shot. He hasn't developed a fully fledged system in his own head, and he doesn't realize it, even necessarily, because he just thinks that if I tell them these things, this will happen. But he doesn't know about all the things. Like he hasn't tried enough things to kind of know where like his players should be, because he hasn't seen his sides try out these various like just different variations on his own work. And so you could be having a situation where he's just like kind of half baked, and he's
Mm-hmm.
going up against the best managers in the world now, and he's still very much new to the job, and he could be very good. But have you seen the progression that would lead you to say that he could be very good and he could realize his potential, or are you seeing kind of stagnation?
The thing is, because of the injuries, it's kind of hard to judge the team as a whole, but you can judge his decisions in terms of overplaying, right? Our starting lineups and certain players off the bench. Um, I do think that he can be a very good manager. What you said earlier about them trying to find a Jurgen Klopp, I really don't like that narrative either, because now you're putting expectations on whoever comes in that, like, you need to have an impact the way this guy did, and you're having them chase like the shadow of someone, and it's so demotivating when you're not able to get to that point. So have I seen anything that makes me want to, let's say, keep him? Yeah, of course. I think we have to be patient.
I,
It's
I
not.
didn't say keep him. I said have you
Oh,
seen the side progress from week one against Frankfurt, the
mhm.
first Bundesliga match, to our last match against Mainz? Do you think we have gotten better at playing in the way Shaheen wants us to?
I think yes, but it's hard to say with everyone injured. But I do think yes, and I like the first game that came to my mind was Madrid. Um, like the first 45, it was amazing. Everything worked exactly, I guess, how they drew it up. But the inexperience showed there, with the subs. But in terms of improvements, yeah, because we weren't able, obviously, different players, system, whatever, but we weren't able to break the side down in the final. Like we had chances, but we couldn't score. Um, but we scored a couple times and we missed some. You know what I mean? So yes, I do think there are improvements. Um, and I don't like. I always say it. I'm Shaheen in. I like Shaheen. Biggest difference between him and someone like an Arteta is that he didn't second like a manager, like a top tier manager, right? So are we gonna be like Arsenal and
Put some respect on Edin Terzic's name.
buddy? All right, it's a complete different style though, because Arteta tried to play.
I'm just kidding.
No,
obviously.
of course, but like the with like Arsenal, right? They were in like a hire and fire situation until they got to Arteta, and they just gave him time, right? Like his first couple seasons weren't exactly great, but they gave him time, and I think if we want this squad to really absorb everything, like we're gonna have to give him time, or else we'll end up like Chelsea and just hire and fire, and that's not exactly what I want. But yeah.
Yeah, but also with Arteta, like this gets back to one of the things you're avoiding in my question is Arteta kind of had a path where you could see how his side was getting better and they
Mm-hmm.
were playing his football better and he was playing all these young
Mm-hmm.
players like he was playing Bukayo Saka at like 18 and he was playing Martinelli at like 19, 20. um and he was slowly becoming a better player and you could see the promise in all these young players, and that's not something we've really seen Nuri Sahin yet rely on these like young
100%.
kids,
Yeah.
because Maxi Bayer, very young player, 21. Karim Adeyemi's still pre-prime attacker at like 22, 23 now, but or no, he's only like 21, 22. Excuse me. Like these guys are young. Jamie Bino Gittins is young, but Jamie Bino Gittins played 1,000 minutes last year for a Champions League finalist, and like this is his first starting campaign, but he was expected to be a starting player this season for a top five league Champions League side, whether that's Borussia Dortmund or anyone else. That's kind of the expectation of where he is this season. So then you look at your other two guys I just mentioned that are young players, and they are very much 30 million plus pound players. Like that's what was paid for them. So there's not really a trust in youth the same way, because if I don't care how young you are, if you move for 30 million pounds, you are not the young player I want to see my coach develop, because you're the young player who has already demonstrated an amount of talent that I
Mm-hmm.
think that the manager will matter less in terms of your career progression, because you are already like far enough along in your development to have the talent. He hasn't brought a guy from the academy and really given him considerable minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and he hasn't really played any young players
Mm-hmm.
anywhere in the side.
100%.
And I don't know if I think from match week 1 to match week 10 that I've seen an improvement. Um, it's hard to say because like our home matches have looked better as the season has gone on, but our away matches have looked, I would say, worse. If you look at our like first real away match, I think it was actually I might be wrong because was Stuttgart our first away match?
Uh,
Stuttgart was the worst away match we've played. But if you look at Mainz, I would almost argue that it's equally bad. And we had some like better away performances earlier in the season that we obviously came out on the wrong side of. But with Mainz, I think that's arguably a worse performance than Stuttgart, because if you have a bad day against a good side, that can happen. It should not happen to Borussia Dortmund and with the amount of quality we have in the squad. But I think there's something to be said that, like, playing as bad against Mainz as we did, man down or not, is quite frankly atrocious.
It's
And also,
inexcusable.
it's a pattern of the third red card in five away matches that, to me, like, not Terzic, Shaheen has not progressed the squad in the way you would expect from match week 1 to match week 10. And you could even look at, like, the first, like, you could say this is the argument for it being the squad and the injuries, is that we looked very similar against Club Bruges, but because we had a fully fit roster and he had a high level attacking player to bring off the bench in Jamie Bino Gins, that's where against Club Bruges the score goes from 1-0 to 3-0. But if you look at the underlying numbers, the performances were actually like very similar, and I would argue that Sturm Graz is a little bit worse. So to me, overall, I'm just not seeing the progression from Shaheen, and that's why that's what I think is like the biggest argument for it being him is he's gotten rid of his system, and the side has failed to progress, and he's not playing like young kids. He's not giving me the promise of a future. He's still incredibly reliant on some older players that are not performing. That he's playing in like random positions, which is the next point. So let's talk about some of that. Do you think he has uh, played a ton of guys in positions that do not benefit them? And so I'm not talking about like Emre Can and an injury. Actually, yeah, we can include Emre Can here because we do have Filippo Mane on the bench, who has been talked about, and the club has essentially stated that he has been the fourth center back since the end of last season. So I would say, including Emre Can, is there anyone who has played in a position that you think has hurt the team and hurt that individual player? Because I think this is another mark of a coach that you need to look at when analyzing, like, what do they know?
100%. I think the big one is Sabitzer, right? Especially after the comments he made. We all knew that Sabitzer as a winger would not work. No, like he doesn't have the legs for it, doesn't have the pace for it. Intensity, he hasn't, like, I can't remember the last time he played winger in general. Um, and that was, you know, I'm sure he had an idea of like a free flowing attack with Sabitzer on the wing, but it really did not work. We could talk about Gross as a right back because, and to your point, I would like more youth in the squad, more youth playing, but he's inexperienced, so he's gonna play it safe, right? By
We
putting,
just don't have a. I will say to
yeah,
his credit, in terms of right back, there is not a very well regarded right back in the academy. That's
mm-hmm,
not to say that guys in the academy at right back, like William Rashidi, couldn't
mm-hmm,
become very good players. They're just not rated that highly right now.
for sure. But the thing is, like, you won't know until you try. I know it's a risk, but if you're gonna choose to overplay your players, right, your starters, Ryerson, you sold Tom Rotha, and then you were forced to play Ben Sebaini, who doesn't have a second. He is the left back. That's it. And um, yeah, it's like there are a lot of questionable decisions. I don't disagree with that. Um, but yeah, Sabitzer is the big one. Um, like you said, right, with the injuries, pardon me, has had to move people around, but Sabitzer is the main one. Where I think we all raised eyebrows, like, why is he playing there? It doesn't suit him at all. Um, and yeah, I think at the start of the season, we were wondering exactly how we'd look. I didn't think we'd get to this point in terms of um, having Gross, a center mid, be our right back, having Chan, unfortunately, because of the injuries, play a center back, even though we have a young guy. I'd rather, you know, I don't know how this is gonna come off, but like I'd rather Filippo Mane get that red card than Emery Chan, because that means that at least, like, the young guys have a
Filippo Mane
path.
can still learn.
Exactly. And he will listen, and he will want to get better, and you can nurture that. Emery Chan, like, he's been playing as a defensive mid for the past few seasons, and then you slide him back expecting like the stability of the team to not fall off. Come on, it doesn't make sense. It's like when he subbed him on as a right back against Madrid. Why? It didn't make sense. I know there's an injury there, but why? Um, but yeah, I'm kind of going off topic a little bit. Um,
Yeah, so I think we can let me speak a little bit more to some of the things that I've seen in terms of positioning that would lead me to believe that Nuri Sahin maybe does not have it. So at the beginning of the season, you would see it was Nico Schlotterbeck at left back. And Nico Schlotterbeck is the only left-footed center back at the club, and that includes Filippo Mane. Uh, and it even includes Yannick Loers, who has played there for a couple minutes now, I think, or he played right center back on his better side. But again, like, you're moving your only left-footed center back out to like the left side in a back three, almost as. But I would argue that just because he's a center back playing left back, he still was playing more as a like center back or more as a left back, excuse me. Given his defensive interactions, how far he was up the pitch, trying to make those defensive interactions, and like yes, you can tell Nico Schlotterbeck, see ball, get ball, and he can just go and try and win it in like random places, and he'll probably win it most times. And like there was a point in the season where Nico Schlotterbeck, through the first like 3 or 4 weeks, was almost at 6 tackles and interceptions per game, and that's like frankly ridiculous. For a fullback, for a center back, very tiny sample size, like statistically insignificant, but like that just goes to show that the defense around him was not working. And so while like Nico Schlotterbeck can be effective in a role you put him in that's not his, um, it's still just gonna not make your team better because then you have other guys out of position. And again, you go to like Sabitzer. There's certain phases of the game where if Sabitzer is on the right wing, he can give you a little bit more midfield stuff because Sabitzer for a midfielder is very bad at pressing, but for a right winger, he's very good. And he's very slow, but he can cover a lot of ground because like your winger's typically more of a sprinter. They can't cover as much ground. So he can help you out in that way. And that helps you out in possession. It helps you out out of possession. But it also hurts you to a degree in possession because if you cannot sprint and you cannot dribble as a right winger, the ball is going to find you regardless. And the biggest chances you create are in transition, and Sabitzer is not able to capitalize on that because like he quite simply cannot run up against elite athletes and not get caught from behind by these more pacier, more physically astute defensive midfielders in the Bundesliga, even if they're on worse sides. Because while Sabitzer can cover ground, it's very different being able to run fast enough with the ball to keep a defender from catching up with you. And like even wingers sometimes have problems with that, even when they're very fast. But to me, Sabitzer, it's 100% of the time. I'd argue Pascal Gross at right back, like he has done that enough that you can't really hold that against him. And Emre Can, like to me, I don't think Emre Can being like I don't think he really was out of position because he's mainly been a six, but in several phases of the game when he is a six, he plays as a center back, and he has played center back in each of the last 3 seasons, including this one, for us. So I just think that saying he's like fully out of position is just not accurate, but that doesn't mean I think that he should be playing there over Filippo Mane. And I don't even think he should really be playing in midfield over a guy like Kiel Watin. And another thing is, back to the start of this argument, is when Schlotterbeck was playing like left back, Ben Sebaini was fit. And Ryerson was playing left back when Ben Sebaini was fit. And he was starting those games. He was getting minutes, and then he got injured. And you have these really stupid quotes where when Ryerson gets hit, he gets up like 99% of the time, so I wasn't terribly worried. And Sebastian Kale said that. And like Ryerson's a warrior, like he is a tough guy, but you did see last season in the first half of the season when we weren't playing Thomas Meunier and we didn't have a real left back in there before we had loaned in Matson, we had to play Ryerson a lot. And what happened to Ryerson? He got injured because like Ryerson coming into his before his time at Borussia Dortmund had a almost spotless like injury record, nothing really serious, and then he had that like month and a half, 2 month thing, last season, and thankfully a big part of that was over the winter break, and we didn't have to feel the brunt of it. But when you're playing this guy on both sides for so long, like there's only so much you can do, and to me, like there's just so many guys that have been out of position, been asked to do things that they're not typically capable of. And to me, that's more where the issue comes in. And like you can look at other managers, like who has Pep Guardiola, who has Ancelotti, like played in a role for game after game where they just weren't capable of doing those roles. Because there's lots of instances, but it happens one game sample and they figure it out immediately. Whereas with Shaheen, everyone can see that Sabitzer on the right wing is like something we're getting away with rather than something that's working. So that to me is more another point I would make against Shaheen.
Yeah, not gonna lie, you're you know, I'm seeing your points, and like I do no, but like it's you're changing my mind is what I'm trying to say, and because I haven't really thought about it in that way. Now with Chan, yes, he's played center back, but and this is an issue that we had even with Terzic, was that we have a youth academy filled with like very good prospects, right? Why don't they tap into it? You know what I mean? Obviously, not every player is going to be best, and things like that. But if you treat the youth academy as as a business, you won't actually be able to quote unquote profit on the talent that you have, because you're selling them before they even develop, or having them be part of the team. Because like I don't remember the last, is obviously Jamie Bino Gittins came through the youth academy, right? While he was bought,
he was signed at 16,
Yeah.
which means like yes, he came through the youth academy, but it wasn't like
exactly, yeah.
We'll talk about Thomas Broik a bit later in the show.
All right.
And what the philosophy is and how it's changing around the youth academy to combine some of the modern stuff where you have to compete, you do have to sign these guys from all over the world at 16, and combining that with your local homegrown players, because player development it still matters, even if you can go out and sign all the best players. It's still better to develop your own and have that winning mentality. So when you have all these guys from different cultures and whatever, they come in and immediately join a winning culture. But back to your point, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, no, it's cool. The point I'm trying to make is, this could go back to the summer when we were confused about the signings, because we were calling for certain positions to be, just to add more depth. And if they weren't going to do that, we were expecting the youth academy to be the area they do tap into. But in both those scenarios, it didn't happen, right? We didn't buy more fullbacks, and we're not using our youth academy for anything spectacular at the minute. So the situation right now, they put themselves in it. So I don't know how they want to proceed, because if they keep doing this, they're gonna run some players into the ground, and these these results are just going to get worse, especially away. And that was a big problem I had last season. Our away record is just, it's so bad. Sorry, our away performances. I don't mean the record. Performances are just really bad. But yeah, I don't know. You've kind of changed my mind here, buddy.
Yeah, so in regards to that point with the youth and how Shaheen has used it, and I think some of this is on Shaheen, and I'm going to break down what I think is on Shaheen in those regards, but I'm also going to break down what I think is on management. And this goes down to like the entire sporting structure at the club. Uh, is I think they have a fundamental misunderstanding of how many minutes Borussia Dortmund has to play this season, how many injuries occur, and just like how many minutes are available to a young player, and how to approach young players and say, listen, this is the amount of minutes you need this season, and this is the amount of minutes we have available for you. And you look at Tom Rotha, who scored U21 Team of the Year left back so far this season. Very very small sample size, obviously, because he's missed 2 or 3 games at this point. So that leaves you like 7 games, which is a short amount, but it's not something to laugh at because there's a lot of players whose careers get made off 7 game sample sizes. But you kind of look at Borussia Dortmund this year with the Club World Cup, you're looking at around 500, excuse me, not 500, 5,000 minutes. We did the math a little bit before the season. Borussia Dortmund's expected to play around 5,000 minutes. If you look at pretty much any starter in all competitions last year, the median starter is going to be around 3,000, which leaves you around 2,000 minutes to work with. And then your center backs are typically going to end up much higher. You're going to have a couple guys, like we had our striker last year who was significantly over. Julian Brandt is a guy who plays regardless of form, fitness, anything. He plays minutes. And there is a value to that. Having guys like that, because they fill those minutes and you need to fill the minutes regardless. And right now, one of the things you're seeing that we've talked a lot on this show about is our inability to fill minutes at left back and right back, because fitness issues are going to happen. I talk a lot about the things we do that can exacerbate them, but you still have to realize that, like, you can do everything wrong and it's only going to have like a 20 to 40% increase on your like injuries. If you do common sense things correctly, you're still going to get a ton of injuries because of how many games these footballers play. International tournaments constantly expanding. The Champions League expanded this year. It'll probably expand again at some point. And like that's unfortunate. The Club World Cup has like quadrupled in size. We should honestly get some guys from the Yellow Wall like to play in that just to save some legs, because otherwise like guys are gonna fall apart. And like that's a serious issue, but that is in part a management issue because you need to say, look, we have 5,000 minutes. We're expecting Ben Sebaini to cover 3,000, which is going to leave you with 2,000. However, Ben Sebaini will have an injury at some point this season. We think you're good. We believe in you. And we are going to say, you are staying here. You're going to get minutes. It's not going to be in the first month of the season. It might not be in the second. But we're going to find you at 20 and 30. And we're going to give you minutes when we can. And we are going to have to give you minutes at some point this season. And that's a good thing to do because, like, there are lots of fullbacks that can play right back and left back, but predominantly when you're building your squad out, you want to have a right back and a left back, because if you have a guy who has to play on both sides and it's like set up that he's going to play on both sides, you are guaranteed to go through a part of the season where you are shorthanded almost completely on one side because that guy is just not going to be able to cover, or he's going to have a month-long injury or he's going to miss a couple weeks through injury. And then you have suspension, stuff like that. Like Benzabaini's already at accumulation. Right there, you're looking at 90 minutes for Rotha. Or whoever the left back would be, because I think Kabar could be very good. I've seen him play. He is not a senior player right now, with all due respect. The part of this that is on Shaheen, in my opinion, is understanding substitutions, understanding like the various roles in your systems and the type of exertion for these various roles, and how deep your squad is in comparison to other teams, and also the difference between fresh legs at the 60th minute from a player who is 50% or 25% worse. Like, let's say you're getting 75% of what you get from Kareem Adeyemi, from Daniel Malen. 75% or 100% of 75% is a lot better than 50% of 100%, which is basically what you're getting at the 60th minute. Just in terms of like his ability to sprint, and like these are also like the harder minutes of the game, because this is when everyone knows the situations. If the game is at all close, like even within two, that's still a game that can be flipped on its head very, very easily. So these are the hardest minutes of the game. This is when you're at your most tired, and having 100% of a player come on at that stage and be able to repeatedly perform sprints is going to make a huge difference. And so one of the things we've seen this season is the fullback perform a ton of sprints, because they both push high, and in defensive transition, you're looking at 60 to 80 yard sprints back, and you have your attackers essentially performing a ton of shorter sprints. So they're performing more sprints, but they're shorter because they're trying to go in behind, they're trying to run at their defender, whatever it is. If you get to the 60th, the 65th minute, and you have a guy who's not 100%, like bringing on, even if it's Cole Campbell, like not necessarily going to have the finished product yet, but he's going to be able to get the ball. He's going to be able to carry the ball a bit better. He's going to be able to press incredibly well. And this is backed up statistically. Like in soccer, everyone knows your tackles and interceptions, your XG, it goes up on a per 90 comparison for when you come off the bench to when you start. So to me, what Shaheen has done most wrong is something that I think even more experienced managers often get wrong, is that nowadays we have 5 substitutions. So they're still kind of stuck into using the systems the way they have been for the past like 30 years almost. And you always want to save a stoppage, and I'm 100% for that. But I think this is something that you also need to think about is, okay, I have guys that can sprint on my bench. I have guys that are tiring, and like you could see if it was against like Mainz, if it was against like some of these other teams in seasons past, you have guys just not performing sprints. And sometimes that happens because football is a very long game and it's very grinding. But when you have the option to make this many substitutions, you need to bring guys on who are going to perform these sprints for you. Because like Daniel Malen's not a guy that presses a ton, but him not pressing a ton is a lot easier to get around when he's going up against tired legs, because it's a lot easier for him to work less hard as he does and make it look like he's working very hard because everyone else is just a bit slower. And that's a big thing that like helps you win games. And so I think Shaheen needs to do a better job of that, is just these like certain roles are demanding and like what you're getting from a guy, like unless they're world class, is not going to be as much as what you're going to get from fresh legs performing sprints repeatedly after the 60th minute, because like you have the 30, like Christopher Trimmel, for instance, again at Union Berlin. Like this guy's about 30 years old. He is very workmanlike, very very hardworking player, and he is very talented. I wish I could be as talented as him at football. But with all due respect to him, like if this guy has run his butt off for 60 minutes and he sees a fresh winger that is in Borussia Dortmund squad, that winger is going to have a certain amount of quality, and they're going to be a better athlete than him. Like that is the case. There's not a single winger in Borussia Dortmund squad that has played out wide this season that is not faster than Christopher Trimmel. And that's not disrespect to him. I shouldn't say that actually, because Sabitzer's played on the wing. But if you're talking about our actual wingers, none of them are faster than him. And like, if you have a guy who's fresh, like Cole Campbell ran 38 kilometers an hour. I don't know what that is in miles, but I know it's really freaking fast. So, like, if you have a guy with that type of pace, like, he's going to get behind him. He's going to get by him at some point. Even if it's just like, I can kick the ball and run because he's tired. Like, go for it. Like, that is a change that needs to happen. That is literally what I do to people. Like, if I see I have stopped playing pickup because of concussions, but when I was playing pickup recently, if I saw a person over the age of 30, I'm kicking and going, and they're not
Speed
keeping
demon.
up.
Speed
Like,
demon.
I'm not incredibly fast, but I know that I'm faster. I'm stronger. Like, you go shoulder to shoulder with me, I'm good. We're good.
I'm good.
Like, I'm fine. And that's something that Nuri Sahin needs to learn as well, is that, like, these guys are fast. Yeah. And if you're going to demand them to sprint, like, 100 times a game, it's a lot easier to just make the substitution at the 60th minute, and you will get the performance you want out of them, because they may not have the same talent, but they will be more workmanlike, and your squad will perform better, and then they'll open up space and they'll open up everything that you want for your like high quality players with that end product, because they'll have guys around them doing the work.
Fully agree. There needs to be more rotation, more trust in players, in terms of the ones that he isn't, using and abusing. I don't mean that in any bad way. But yeah, no, 100% really agree. It was an issue last season. It's an issue this season, and something needs to change. Something really needs to change. But I'm ready to move on when you are. That was something
I kind of talked about with Fulkerg last year, is he was playing 90 minutes pretty much every single game, and you could clearly see there was a fall off at a certain point in the season where Fulkerg just stopped being able to do things. And he turned it on for the Champions League, but in the league, he just couldn't sustain it. And you're seeing similar things happen with guys like Julian Brandt this season. Julian Brandt's played over 90% of the available minutes. That is absurd at this stage of the season. He started almost every single match, if not every single match. And I think his quality is borderline unquestionable. But if you're playing a guy 3 times a week, every single week, they're going to turn in like these exhausted performances. And this is another question I would have for you. How much of Julian Brandt's performance this season do you put down to Shahin's system not getting the best out of him? How much do you put it down to him not playing to the best of his ability? And how much of it do you put down to it being him just getting overused, because he had 4 assists in like the first 6 or 7 games, but since then it's kind of like dried up essentially?
I think that Brandt is not playing well, or as well as we'd like, because of Shahin. I've seen a lot of people try to blame Brandt, saying he's not interested. We should get this guy. We should get that guy. Blah blah blah. Brandt is definitely being overplayed, and a lot of the creative burden is placed on his shoulders. So, you know, the first person that the team looks to typically when we're attacking is Brandt, because that's what the instructions were. Give it to Brandt, he'll find the pass. That's kind of what it feels like when I'm watching. Um, and after a certain time, if you're a defender, you're gonna put two and two together. The first ball is gonna go to Brandt, or at least it's gonna end up with Brandt at some point. So, his legs, like he needs rotation. Now you have Sabitzer, who could play 10, and that can give him a break. But you also have some young guys, who can play 10 and give him a break. You don't even have to play 10 in certain formations. You know what I mean? So there's ways around giving Brandt a break. I don't think it's Brandt's fault. I think if he was genuinely disinterested and he was walking around the pitch, then you could say, "Oh, he's really not trying to play. It's his fault." But he's trying. He's playing every game. He's a great teammate. So it's definitely Shaheen.
Yeah, I think he's also like he's been a victim his whole career of being a guy that's not necessarily a great presser, not incredibly fast, and has like a bit of a easiness about his game. Like everything is kind of in like the flow state essentially, and when he's not in flow, it looks very like casual, but that's just like the way he plays the game, and that's just
his
like
style.
how he touches the ball essentially.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is like he's just not that fast and he's not that great at pressing. And for a lot of the season, if you play him alongside Daniel Mullen, that really exposes the side because Daniel Mullen from the start of the game is not pressing really much at all. And if you're putting him alongside Daniel Mullen and Jamie Bino Gittins, that's just not going to work. Like that,
Yeah.
that trio does not press. When you have a Maxi Bayer, you have a Kareem Adeyemi, they both press. They work very, very hard, and I think that's something that I'm very excited for in the second half of the season, regardless of who's the manager, is these two guys, like, they really work. And that's, like, another issue I had with, like, saying that Cherky fixes anything is, like, Cherky is a very luxury player. Like, it is a luxury to be able to have him in your side, because as talented as he is on the ball, he is incredibly lazy against it. And like if you put him in between Danielle Mullen and Jamie Bino Gittins, Jamie Bino Gittins is an average presser. I don't mean to be throwing him in there. He's just like the weakest presser alongside Danielle Mullen's not a presser. Jamie Bino Gittins is like
He
fine.
tries. Yeah.
And then your other wingers are pretty good. Like Cole Campbell, it's only been off the bench pretty much. But off the bench, he's a very capable presser so far. Tiny sample size. But Bayer's good. Adeyemi's good. If you're putting Cherky in between these two, that's a bit more exciting. That's something that you can then accommodate. You need to continuously buy wingers that can press to accommodate that because you need to have balance in your side. Unfortunately, I would love to see like 11 guys with tech and just vibe and just have fun.
Not how that
but
works,
that's
yeah.
not how you win games. That's not how you win trophies. But yeah, so let's get into our last little bit here. Because I believe Julian Brandt has almost 2 xG. He's historically been an above average finisher. Borussia Dortmund overall has scored more than expected, so that is not a way in which we've been unlucky. But let's talk about the ways in which we have been unlucky. And so Kobel, the last 3 seasons, has gotten better each season by post-shot XG, minus his goals allowed. He started basically average in his first season at Borussia Dortmund to slightly above average, and then last season he was well above average, just in the Bundesliga. And this season he has let in 14 goals from 10 post-shot XG, which basically means that if you look at where the shots are hitting the goal, you would expect him to have saved 4 more goals based off the opportunities that we've given up. It's not just, where the shot hits the goal. It's where the shot is taken from, what part of the body, how many defenders are around, all the stuff that goes into XG, but also like where it hits the goal, how likely you are to concede it. So Kobel's basically let in 4 more goals than he should have this season. So I think that's definitely a bit of luck because we have a pretty significant sample size over this guy's like last 3 seasons of him being fairly good. And then you also have XG difference, which is just like your XG4 as a side minus your expected goals against. And we are 4th in the league by that metric with 0.27, although Stuttgart is very, very close and Frankfurt is about like 0.1 off below us. So we are top 4 in that metric, which is typically the best predictive metric for where you will finish a season. And then we've also had like luck in terms of our injuries. We've had bad luck. Like, as much as I can talk about Sahin misusing the squad and like Karim Adeyemi playing minutes he didn't need to play, you can also talk about how we are deeply unfortunate to have like 11 guys out at the same time. And that is also true. Because in terms of injury prevention and like using your squad in the way that prevents injuries, you can only do so much. So how much of these things do you think is impacting Borussia Dortmund's start to the campaign? And if all these things were like neutral in terms of luck, do you think then you could be saying a bit more about Nuri Sahin?
Well, like the biggest one for me, since we've been talking about it so much, is the injuries, because they are our starters, right? Center backs, obviously Karim, and if I'm not mistaken, I heard that Mensabaini picked up something in his international break. So injuries definitely plays like the biggest factor. Kobel, like, him letting in 4 more goals than he's supposed to, that's, it's a stat, but I don't think it makes the biggest difference. Sahin has made mistakes, and that's okay in all honesty, but we do need to address the injuries, which I think if all the players were fit, it is a different squad in terms of these performances, especially in the away games. I say especially, I hope in the away games, because that's where we dropped the most points. I think the first game we said earlier, I think the first game was Werder Bremen, and that was a draw. So those types of games where you should be winning them, I hope you should be winning them. And yeah, so it's a situation where like we could say, oh, it's this, oh, it's this, oh, it's this. It's definitely a combination of things. And right now it's kind of a test of how can Sahin react, right? How is he going to overcome this? Because this is a pretty difficult challenge, right? Your starting center backs are injured, minus obviously Nico. You're having to play your defensive mids as a center back and a right back. Your main player, I would say, at the start of the season, Karim, got hurt early. Watian, who should have more minutes, picked up an injury. It's a combination of things, and it's not going well. But if I was to say like one thing, it's definitely the injuries.
Yeah, I mean that's the easiest like thing to point at in terms of your luck, but the most impactful is definitely the post shot XG because you can look at that first shot against Augsburg and it's like I believe Kobel was like very, very good last year. And then he goes and he like lets that one in and I'm like how are we allowing that? And if you look at that directly correlates to a point. Whereas like with injuries, like we had like our full squad when we drew Werder Bremen. we had pretty much our full squad, maybe minus Koto, when we dropped points against Stuttgart, and we got absolutely like torn apart.
Thrashed.
So
Yeah.
like I think that the biggest like luck thing is other teams right now are getting more lucky than us.
Hmm.
That's not to say that fourth is the bar. Like fourth should not be the bar. Um, if we were in fourth and we were getting better week on week, I think there'd be something more to say. But we haven't picked up an away match or an away point in four straight away matches, and that makes it sound like we're getting worse and not getting better. And maybe like the quality aside, we're playing is up because Union very very astute defensively. That is a difficult place to play. Stuttgart definitely a better team, but Augsburg's not. So Mainz is not. So that does not point to anything positive there. But let's move on to a more fun topic and stop ripping apart Nuri Sahin. So Dortmund's Thomas Broik has come in from Hertha Berlin, where he was a very well-regarded academy director, essentially, and he wants to model Borussia Dortmund's academy after Barcelona. Can you talk to us a little bit about Barcelona's academy and what do they do that makes them so special, aside from giving Messi human growth hormones?
Well, you know.
I just want a
No, you're right.
little legal disclaimer. I don't know exactly what they gave him, but they gave him something to help with a health
Well,
condition he had when he
they
was a
didn't
child.
give it. They didn't give it. The medical
They
professionals
paid
did.
for it.
They paid for it. What do they do different? So there was a stint in when Bartomeu was our president, who I think I mentioned it earlier that I didn't want to happen at Dortmund, which he was just trying to profit off of these prospects they had. But if we take that era out, every other president prior made sure that there was a pipeline from the academy into the first team. Now, whether that starts with training, right, just having them being part of the training, and
Banning
encouraging
Xbox in their academy.
Xbox.
They banned Xbox or something in their academy. It was like
Oh, well,
they had them on like not like the PS1 or whatever.
that's hilarious. I didn't even know that. That's so funny.
There's
They need
something
the
weird
focus.
they did where like in their academy housing they like just the video game stuff they had was like really old as of like
Mm,
2-3 years ago. I don't think it's still like that.
mm.
But yeah, that's like just a funny anecdote. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
selling guys like Keita Balde, go on.
Yeah. Selling Keita all day, damn. But there were like these players ultimately, right, that they sold under Bartomeu. They didn't really lead anywhere. But the thing is, in that time, the players that were promoted, um,
Icardi led somewhere. He had a very good career.
yeah, but I'm talking about Bartomeu.
Oh, was he not?
Yeah,
Was my time not synced up?
yeah, I think Bartomeu took over. Here I have the dates because I knew I was gonna talk about this. He took over 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But under Laporta now, and in his first stint, and under Sandro Rosell, the pipeline was there, right? It was encouraged, right, that the managers and the coaches would look into the youth system because sometimes you don't want to go out and spend 30 million or in those days 15 million for a winger or whatever when we can just nurture one, right? Let's use our academy. And that's the thing that I haven't seen in a while really at Dortmund, where there isn't a pipeline anymore. Like the last player that came out of the academy, that started in the academy, I can't even remember who, honestly. Other than obviously, like I mentioned, Jamie Bino Gins, right? But he was brought in externally. So was it Zagadou? No, it's not Zagadou. Who was it?
Zagadou was brought in at like 16-17 from
Mm-hmm.
PSG's academy after his contract expired.
Mm-hmm.
Gio Reyna was brought in from NYCFC at 16 for a fairly substantial fee.
Mm-hmm.
Who else? Jadon Sancho was like
Yeah, I
uh,
remember that, of
fee
course.
again at like 16-17, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So like that is a part of modern football that is you're still developing
Mm-hmm.
them from 16 to
For
like
sure. For
19,
sure.
but your point is very, very like it's it's just correct. Yes, like
Yeah, yeah,
there's a difference
100%.
between like having these guys and complementing them with like a guy like Kiel Whiten who's been at the club since
Hmm.
he was 11.
Yeah, exactly, right? And if you look at like players that played in the first team and didn't work out, like um what's that center back? Todibo, right? He's still a decent player. It just didn't work out, right? But you look now, right, where they have Kubarsi, and obviously you have certain players are freaks, right? Like this whole generation that we have at the moment. These guys are all incredible. Um, from Brunel, who unfortunately got injured, Casado, obviously Lamine, and Kubarsi. I'm not sure if I said him already, but regardless of the fact,
I
Balde.
mean, you're
Uh,
rejecting guys, sending them out on loan to Champions League sides from your academy.
but like the thing is though, the pipeline is there, right? The last one, like I think the biggest one that came out of the Bartomeu era was Araujo and Ricky Puig, who's playing in LA Galaxy right now. So it's like the most important thing is that you make it clear to the
Can't
youngsters
believe you
that
just.
listen.
Sorry. I have another random name to hit you with. I can't believe you just forgot Dennis Suarez.
Yo, I liked Dennis, but god damn. He went out to, I think it was Villarreal, and then when he came back, his contract had like a clause that if he played a certain amount of games, they had to pay Villarreal. I think it was Villarreal or Celta Vigo. They had to pay him like 6 million or something. So his minutes were like limited only because of that stupid clause. But also a very good player. But the point is, they are promised that, like, listen, if you do well, we will promote you. We want you to be there, right? We want you to represent us, right? Because you playing makes us proud, right? And we want you to, to wear our colors and be excited about that. So there's that aspect of like, this is your team, right? You can play in the cap now or the, I forgot the name right now, the Olympic Stadium, whatever it is. Um, so that's
I
what's
thought you were about
missing.
to hit us with like the Spotify camp now.
No, 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 no. But that's what's missing at Dortmund, right? Like I don't see the pipeline. We need more youngsters. It doesn't all work, like I said, but you have to, why would you go out and spend more money when you have guys that can be nurtured, right? That can be built up into a much better player. Like Sergio Roberto. He's a center mid. He came through as a center mid, and then he played right back. I know a lot of people, weren't happy with him, whatever. But for a couple seasons, he was actually a very, very good right back, right? But that comes down to just putting
Scored
him.
against PSG.
Scored against PSG. He broke through the Madrid lines for that Messi goal where he took off his shirt and whatever. Like he's an excellent player. Thiago Alcantara, of course, Rafinha, his brother. So you have all these names, and the same can be said about Dortmund. We just don't see them as often, and we need to see more of it, right? Christian Pulisic, right? Excellent player, right?
That again is a guy signed at like
For
16,
sure,
was a
right? But
U.S.
that even
like youth
happens.
international.
Yeah, but that even happens in Barca, right? Where they bring in players from outside,
Yeah,
and they help
absolutely.
them
It,
grow.
it happens everywhere. I mean, like you spent like
Exactly.
what, like 8 to 10 million on like Pedri, when he was
Yeah.
like 17.
Man, what a player. But yeah. Um. Sorry, I love that
You're
guy.
good. Anyway,
Uh.
let's get into
Yeah.
like the
Sorry.
Dortmund stuff because I think I have some stuff to complement your good details of. So we're clearly trying to see uh an increase in our talent development. So the guys we take from like whatever the first age group is, whether it's like U6s, U8s, U4s, whatever it is gonna be, like we want those guys to be developing to stay within the team. Obviously, you're gonna have changeover each year. Um, but basically, we want the children we take to be developing at a much higher level so they can compete with the international talent that we bring in as a complement. And like that takes years to implement. So, what Broik is talking about is it's going to take 5 to 10 to 15 years even to really see the results. Um, there are good signs though going forward because like you're talking about like when was the last like homegrown player that we've seen since like you almost want to say like a Marco Royce, a Mario Götze, like that level of player. Even like a Sven Bender. Um, these are
Wow.
guys that are very good from Borussia Dortmund, and a lot of the guys that were these more local guys, like I think it was like Zenis Bernic, is now playing in the second tier, and you have a lot of other guys from the second tier, and you also talked about how like yes, there's some guys getting cast off from Barcelona, but that's because they're producing so much talent that they just have too much that's never going to have a home in their first team and are going to have to go elsewhere. Um, and you are seeing a bit more of that now, whereas Zenis Bernic went to the second tier and didn't play much. Rafael Lubak was our six in the same way that Zenis Bernic was 4 to 5 years ago. And like he's gone to the second tier as well. Um, but you also have guys like Namdi Collins who went to Eintracht Frankfurt and he's playing there. And there's something to be said that maybe like he'd be getting minutes at Borussia Dortmund as the fourth center back this season. Didn't play at all last season for Frankfurt. So like there's issues there as well, obviously.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Ansgar Nauf has gone on to
I was gonna
have what
mention
is
him
now
too.
a pretty good career.
Hmm.
And you even look at I think it was a guy at oh my god, um I forget, but there's like another midfielder at it was a club that was struggling in the second tier last year, but he was at least playing a lot at just like 21, I think, something relatively young, not
Hmm.
lighting the world on fire, but my god, I can see his little buzz cutted head. Very German looking individual. Uh, midfielder as well. Like you're seeing these guys and like going from a guy who never really played a ton in the second tier to guys that play a bit more in the second tier to guys that are playing more in the first tier. Like everything kind of helps you. And so this gets us into like another top. Like you have Yusufa Mukoko, who, even though he's no longer at Borussia Dortmund, he's averaging a goal every 90 something minutes. And that's a guy that was here since he was 13. You look at Tom Rotha this year, who is playing very, very well. And he's been at the club since he was like 15, 14, something like that. Like, not necessarily since he was a child, but like he was still developed in his more formative years. And all of a sudden, when you're having more of these guys, it allows your management to say to your manager, look, we have all these guys. Like, we know we're developing this level of talent. You need to be able to use these guys. And it also allows you, when you have guys that don't quite make the grade, to say, okay, Tom Rotha went for 5 million. Like, granted, that's shrunken down by a buyback, but
Hmm.
that was a bargain and a half. Namdi Collins for 1 million. This guy, uh, like, is looking like he could be a steal because if he's going to be playing like significant minutes for Eintracht Frankfurt this year, which there are some signs pointing to, not an incredible amount, but there are signs pointing to it. If he goes and does that, then you can say, look at your proof of concept. Whereas, like, previously, clubs could be saying, like, look, your academy's been good, but, like, all your former players that are in the Bundesliga, it's mainly guys that played for BVB2. And there's a difference there. Um, so that's something you need to be mindful of. And I think it's also worth watching Julian Hetver, and like utilizing him because if he walks on a free and he's gonna go to a Bundesliga side next year, it's gonna piss me off. So you need to sign an extension because otherwise he's gonna be Chris Furyk 2.0. And that's not to say Chris Furyk would be as successful at Borussia Dortmund, but you want to hold on to these guys for like a year or two longer, give them some chances in the first team, and that's when the value skyrockets and you can start to sell the ones that don't make the cut for a bit more. Because I don't think
Hmm.
Chris Furyk is necessarily a Borussia Dortmund quality, but he is worth more than we let him go for. And like, if Hetver's contract just runs out, then he is again he's going to be worth a lot more than what we let him go for, and we spent 500K to bring him in at not like 18, 19.
Hmm.
And this year he's already at like 10 goal contributions, having an incredible season for the second team. So not an
If
academy player, but similar concept.
For sure, if I just want to drop this before I forget it. One thing that helps like a lot of these academies, not just Barca, but even like Monaco and things like that, is a consistent identity from right the youth all the way into the first team. Obviously, right, Spain has their own style and things like that, but even in Barca, there is an identity, and you have to understand and play in that style. Now, in recent years, we do have managers that are similar, but and then you do have the occasional switch, right? Where Terzic or I know Shaheen, like he's kind of jumping between ideas now. So it will be really beneficial if they look for managers who fit into their brand, so that when these youngsters, sorry, when these youngsters get into the first team, they will feel comfortable, right? Because they know where their winger will be and where their fullback will be, and what patterns of play uh, um, they should look for and go through, and so on and so forth. So I think that's really important, if they do want to build their academy, into sorry to create that pipeline. Go.
Yeah, and real quick, Walt, you just mentioned Monaco. Perfect segue. So Monaco's
Mm.
purchased Paris Brunner and loaned him to Cercle Bruges. I believe Monaco is the purchaser. But do you think he will bounce back from his struggles? Because obviously, not playing a ton, preferred to some other younger guys. Uh, what do you think about this?
So I remember last season when we were hearing about everything. It just yeah, it is Monaco. It just bothered me how much like drama, but yeah, great job.
Thank you, thank
Um,
you.
it just bothered me how much like drama was around the situation, because I feel like as a young player, of course, right, you want to make waves, you want to start, you want to, you know, so on and so forth. Uh, you should also have the patience to wait your turn. And I don't doubt what he's capable of. I just don't know if his ego and attitude will get him far based on what I've read. I don't know him personally, so I can't really say much. But based on what I've read, he has like an aspect of like, where he's very confident in his abilities, and he expects to be starting and things like that.
Sounds
So
like every
good.
professional footballer confident in their abilities.
I know,
Because
but he
that is a trait you need. And I do
100%.
agree with you. Like this all comes down to him. He felt that he was ready to play senior football
Hmm.
above the third division of German soccer, and
Hmm.
like yes, he had some issues, but maybe the fresh environment is good for him, and it could be humbling because he is not necessarily that same name. He's not necessarily like your U17, like the hope of German football, a U17 Euro champion, U17 world champion. Like he's
Hmm.
not necessarily like looked at as the talisman. And like that'll be a good skill for him to learn because there are very few guys that go their whole career as the talisman, as the guy carrying the banner. And like while he may not necessarily ever play for Borussia Dortmund again, it only helps Borussia Dortmund for him to perform well, and it only hurts them if he does not.
Hmm.
So in terms of the club, like this is a guy you should be rooting for and like maybe he was a bit of a dick at
Thank you,
Borussia
bro.
Dortmund. Like stuff happens.
He's still young.
He's still
Still,
18.
yeah.
Him getting 60 minutes at this stage of his career in any professional league is fairly impressive. And, like, I don't think he's anywhere near done. And he has a lot to prove. And it's really just about does he have the work ethic? Does he have the talent to kind of prove he is the player that a lot of people thought he would be? Um, it's like a we'll see, but again, it only helps Borussia Dortmund if he performs. If he does not perform, it only makes our academy look worse. So I hope he turns it around for his sake, for the club's sake. Borussia Dortmund's, I couldn't care about that multi-club nonsense he's now a part of. Next, we have Borussia Dortmund sacking the chief scout Edward Graf. His contract was due to expire at the end of the season, but they felt that they didn't want him to be involved because of the sensitive nature of uh, the matters of knowing which players Borussia Dortmund is going to be signing. Some key signings that we made during his time would be Sabitzer, Fulkrug, Matson, Bensebaini, Haller, Adeyemi, Schlotterbeck, Ryerson, Sula, Ozchen, Duranville, and Meyer. I think with a lot of these guys, there's key voices you hear about as their advocates. Like, I believe Salih Ozchen's advocate was Matthias Sammers. Kareem Adeyemi was Marco Rosa's before he got sacked. Some of the other guys, kind of fit with what a certain coach was asking for in terms of like physical players. Like, there's multiple guys involved in all these, but this was the chief scout. I also did not include Modeste and Mecha because by all reports those were Terzic signings over anything else. So what are your just general thoughts on this decision?
Well, first of all, hilarious. They decided to sack him just because, right, they didn't want him to know what they wanted to plan in the future. But I think I don't really have a huge opinion. Right, some of those names, I do like. Obviously, Schlotterbeck, great. Adeyemi, great. Duranville, one for the future, we hope. But all in all, it personally, as your average fan, right, it doesn't really impact me. Whoever takes this place, I just I hope they do bring players, or scout some players that do fit with how Dortmund want to play in the future.
Yeah, it's key to keep in mind that the squad
Mm-hmm.
building is not going to be on your chief scout. Uh, that's going to be on a guy in a director of football's role. Stepping into the role, I think, is mainly going to be like Mislintat now, which does worry me because, like, do you want him to have more power? That's not something he's necessarily thrived with in recent years in two of his
Mm-hmm.
last three jobs. But like, it's so hard to have an opinion when you're not in the backroom meetings and you're not there to see, like, maybe he said of like Sabitzer, like, this is a good player, he can play a lot of different positions, but I don't know where he's gonna play for us, and he doesn't fit in this role, he doesn't fit in that. Like, maybe he said that and I'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
that guy's smart, I don't know. But he could also be sitting in there and saying like, Ben Sabaini has every ability to go to a top club and dominate, and he's gone to a top club and been the same player he's been, which is very talented guy that happens to just completely lose it every once in a while, and in a way that just makes no sense to me. Haller, like, it's the biggest what if. Like, if Haller was fit that full season, I mean, that that
Oh
team would
boy.
have been
Oh man.
walking the league. Um, like, Ozchan, maybe Sammer was like, oh, this guy's good, but maybe that's because Graf was bringing up his name at a meeting, and Sammer was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Ozchan, love him, and then Sammer was pushing it. Like, we don't know.
For
Um,
sure, for sure.
uh, so yeah, no thoughts. Let's move into some transfer rumors. For whatever reason, I was seeing us linked with Pepe, even though we have a striker, and he's clearly wanting minutes. So we're not going to talk too much about that one, because he's not starting over Saru. But let's talk about the name I've seen more strongly linked. It's Olivier Basgagli. What are your thoughts on this player? Because obviously, like, you should be somewhat familiar, having, I believe, played against him last season in the Champions League.
Honestly, I don't like the way you worded that because it's like if I don't know, But
I'm hoping. I'm hoping. I'm trying to
mhm.
buy some time so I can pull up some more information. Let's be
um,
honest.
I he's a center back, right?
Yeah.
Um, Clearly, they don't want to use the youth talent that we have at center back, and rather go out and spend money, which I'm not exactly happy about. But um, you know, it all goes back to what we said earlier in terms of just using and mismanaging minutes. Um, Ultimately, we wouldn't be in this situation if Filippo Mane stayed, or if is it Koulibaly, the other center back, right?
Koulibaly's
If
Mane has stayed. Koulibaly's out on loan.
Well, yeah, but like if they kept Koulibaly and they
Yeah.
kept him in the team, right? Then that's two young center backs eager to play, eager to prove a point, and that's a lot better than going out and spending money on a 26-year-old that's probably gonna expect to start. Um, so I don't understand it, if I'm being quite honest, but they kind of made their bed. That's kind of why they have to go out and sign a defender. Pardon me. But yeah, what do you think?
0% chance this happens unless someone gets sold.
Yeah.
So that's my conclusion here. We got linked with every bad player from PSV last year for whatever reason. None of the good ones. We did actually get linked very briefly, very not seriously, with Bakayoko, who is good, so I don't want to insult him, but like to me, there's a world in which we sign Olivier Buscaglia, and it's one that I don't want to live in because that's one in which we sell Nico Schlotterbeck. Because this guy's a ball playing center back.
Mm-hmm.
He is left footed. 12.76 key passes or progressive passes, not key passes. If he was doing that, it's key passes as a
That's
center back.
nuts.
That'd be something
Yeah.
different. But
Yeah.
yeah. So in terms of progressive passing, he's elite, but PSV are dominating. A lot of the Eredivisie is not great, but it's a decent league. He is 26, which is prime age. He's turned by the time you're listening to this, he will be 27. He's not necessarily like if I'm selling Nico Schlotterbeck, he's not the guy I want to bring back in. I'm gonna be honest. Because I'm gonna want a guy who's either a bit younger or a guy who's a bit better. And like to me, it's just he's good. He's not like
Schlotterbeck good.
he's not blowing me away.
Yeah.
If we're like he would make more sense as our backup center back than like Nicolas Sula. But Nicolas Sula is making $10 million a year. He's about to have one of the longest injuries in his career. Granted, it's only about a month and a half, but I don't know if someone's going to be offering the money in the summer or the winter even that would kind of match up to where you can move Sula and get in Buscagli. Like I just don't think it would be worth it to me. So I don't want to see this happen because I think it
Yeah.
would be if someone comes and says, Nico, here's the bag. Uh, I'm Real Madrid. I'm a club that has been sponsored by Franco and only exists in the modern sense because of him. Uh, please take all our money that we have from illicit
Uh,
deeds and make us.
the deeds.
Well, they did a what they have
They
they.
did. It's just funny.
I mean, he brought in like the Argentinian legend in like the 50s.
Mm-hmm. No, this is
Through a
is
little
stupid.
some state stuff. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah, it's bad. But no, this is if you're gonna go out and spend money, spend it on a fullback. You don't spend it on a center back. You don't need a center back because you have the academy. You have Filippo Mane on the bench, right? Is he that bad that you're not willing, or are you Shaheen only able to work with experienced players? Like, is he not able to nurture? That's a really good question, right? Because we haven't seen a lot of youth talent pull through. He's brought up Cole Campbell out of necessity, and he's had to play him out of necessity because he's lefty, and there's no one other than Karim who's a lefty, right? So he adds something different. We haven't seen Watien in the squad yet. If I don't think he played, right? Has he?
he's had a cameo.
A cameo, great, right? So
He
he's not
cleared a ball
able.
in a match.
But yeah, so I didn't think of this earlier. Maybe he doesn't know how to nurture, and how to, grow the talent. And if that's something that he's lacking, then he should, I think, add someone to his team if there isn't someone already there who's able to do that, who's able to instill the qualities that he wants. Because it doesn't make sense. You're going out to buy another center back when you have an injury crisis at both fullback positions. There's a defensive mid as a
Nuri
right back.
Sahin himself said Filippo Mane was going to be ready when we called upon him. We have not called upon him.
Bro, we need him now.
I mean,
Yeah.
that quote is not aging well, I will say. So
It really isn't. It really isn't. So I think all in all, I hope, I'm sure he's a great guy, this Olivier, but yeah, no, this doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. Man.
anyway, that's been our show.
Yeah.
Ali, before we head out, is there anything you want to plug?
Um, check us out on all platforms. Dortmund Dispatch, 1D in the middle on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We're actually now on Blue Sky. So check us out on there. If you're on there, give us a follow. We're trying to get active, build our community on there. So we'd really appreciate your support on that end.
Yeah, and if you have not already, please watch our new YouTube video. It's a Borussia Dortmund trivia video. So please watch. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It's genuinely hilarious. Had Carver from the BVB pod on there. So please watch and enjoy that. And that'll do it for us. Have a good one.